campaign of persecution against devout Jews. This triggered a revolt against his rule, the Maccabean Revolt. 36. These decrees were a departure from typical Seleucid practice, which did not attempt to suppress local religions in their empire. 37. Scholars of Second Temple. Judaism sometimes referred to Antiochus' reign as the Antiochene crises for the Jews. 38. And as a period of civil war between Hellenized and Orthodox forms of Judaism. 39. 40. Maccabean Revolt, 167–141 BC. According to 1 Maccabees, 2 Maccabees, and Josephus, 41, the Seleucid Emperor Antiochus IV, R 175–164, moved to assert strict control over the Seleucid satrapy of Syria and Phoenicia. 42, after her successful invasion of Ptolemaic Egypt, 170–168 BCE, was turned back by the intervention of the Roman Republic. 43, 44, he sacked Jerusalem and the Temple, suppressing Jewish and Samaritan religious and cultural observances. 42, 45, and imposed Hellenistic practices. C 168–167 BCE. 45. Antiochus' actions enraged the elites but also the rural population, who had remained mostly untouched by Hellenism. In 167 BCE, Mattathias, a Hasmonean lineage Jewish priest, killed a Jew in his hometown Modiin who stepped forward to offer sacrifice to the Greek gods. He then killed a Seleucid official who ordered the sacrifice. According to 1 Maccabees, he declared, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me." 46, and fled with his sons and followers to the wilderness of Judea. These events signaled the start of the Maccabean Revolt. 47, when Mattathias died, his son Judas Maccabeus took over as leader of the revolt. He used guerrilla tactics to defeat several small Seleucid armies while Antiochus IV was fighting a war in the east. The conflict was evenly religiously charged because, in order to distinguish themselves from their Jewish opponents, the Maccabees presented themselves as radical Jews and carried out large-scale forced circumcisions. Judas eventually succeeded in capturing Jerusalem and purifying the allegedly desecrated temple. 48. This event is commemorated by the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. 49. The Maccabean cause was aided further in 164 BCE when Antiochus IV died and his generals fought over the guardianship of his young son Antiochus V. This turmoil ended when Antiochus IV's nephew, Demetrios I returned from exile in Rome, deposed Antiochus V, and ascended to the Seleucid throne. Demetrios continued the war against the Maccabees and backed their Jewish opponents. Around this time Judas was able to make a treaty with the Romans. Around 161 BCE, a Roman-Jewish treaty was signed. In 160 BCE, the Seleucid general Bacchides defeated the Maccabees at the Battle of Elassa in 160 BCE. Judas' death during the battle dealt a blow to the rebels. 50. After Judas died, his brother Jonathan Appius took over as the leader of the revolt. He benefited from another internal Seleucid struggle between King Demetrius I Soter and an usurper, Alexander Ballas. Both turned to Jonathan, attempting to win him over with concessions, and Alexander Ballas even elevated him to the position of high priest. Alexander Ballas was eventually able to assert himself, but he was quickly defeated by Demetrios' son Demetrios II. The battle for the throne was now between him and the general Diodotos Tryphon, which strengthened Jonathan's position even more. This did not change when Tryphon was able to capture and murder Jonathan in Acre through treachery. 51. In 142 BCE, Simon Lassi, the last of Mattathias' sons, took over as rebellion leader and high priest. He was eventually successful in destroying the Akra, a fortified complex in Jerusalem that was the last symbol of Seleucid rule in Judea. 52. Hasmonean vassal state, 140–110 BCE. After Simon was assassinated and replaced by his son John Hyrcanus I, 134–104 BCE, Antiochus filed a large army into Judea, forcing Hyrcanus to surrender as a vassal ruler in Jerusalem after a 2-year siege. After Judas died, his brother Jonathan Apphus took over as the leader of the revolt. He benefited from another internal Seleucid struggle between King Demetrius I Soter and a usurper, Alexander Ballas. Both turned to Jonathan, attempting to win him over with concessions, and Alexander Ballas even elevated him to the position of high priest. Alexander Ballas was eventually able to assert himself, but he was quickly defeated by Demetrios' son Demetrios II. The battle for the throne was now between him and the general Diodotos Tryphon, which strengthened Jonathan's position even more. This did not change when Tryphon was able to capture and murder Jonathan in Acre through treachery. 51. In 142 BCE, Simon Gassi, the last of Mattathias' sons, took over as rebellion leader and high priest. He was eventually successful in destroying the Akra, a fortified complex in Jerusalem that was the last symbol of Seleucid rule in Judea. 52. Hasmonean vassal state, 140–110 BCE. After Simon was assassinated and replaced by his son John Hyrcanus I, 134–104 BCE, Antiochus filed a large army into Judea, forcing Hyrcanus to surrender as a vassal ruler in Jerusalem after a 2-year siege. However, following Antiochus' death in the Seleucid-Parthian Wars in 129 BCE, the Seleucids were assumed too weak to pursue an active policy outside of Syria. Hyrcanus was relieved of his burden. 3. Establishing the now de facto independent Hasmonean state of Judea, minting coins for the first time, and overruling the state's territory. Stone bowl fragment with the name Hyrcanus, which was discovered in Givati parking lot, Jerusalem. Hasmonean period, 110–63 BCE.
Yes, sorry. Somebody's texting me on my cell phone. I cannot read my cell phone and listen to this same time. So I have to read from the top again. I have to read from there.
Esther and Daniel, and writings that are a part of the Apocrypha and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the major sources for the time period are the writings of Josephus, Philo, the books of the Maccabees, Greek and Roman writers, and later rabbinic literature. The destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 CE is considered one of the most cataclysmic events in Jewish history. 8. The loss of Mother City and Temple necessitated a reshaping of Jewish culture to ensure its survival. Judaism's temple-based sects disappeared. 9. Rabbinic Judaism, centered around communal synagogue worship and Torah study, eventually evolved out of the Pharisaic school and became a mainstream form of the religion. 10, 8, 11, 12. During the same period, Christianity gradually separated from Judaism, becoming a predominantly Gentile religion. 13. A few decades after the first Jewish Manwa, the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132–135 CE, erupted. Its brutal suppression by the Romans further dwindled Jewish population in Judea and enhanced the role of Jewish diaspora, relocating the Jewish demographic center to Galilee, where the Mishnah was redacted. and eventually to Babylonia, with smaller communities across the Mediterranean. History. Persian period, 538-332 BC. Illustrations by Gustav de Ezra reads the law to the people. Nehemiah views the ruins of Jerusalem's walls according to the book of Ezra. The Persian Cyrus the Great ended the Babylonian exile in 538 BC. 14. The year after he captured Babylon. 15. The exile ended with the return under Zerubbabel the prince, so called because he was a descendant of the royal line of David, and Joshua the priest, a descendant of the line of former high priests of the temple, and their construction of the second temple in the period 521-516 BCE. 14. The Cyrus cylinder, an ancient tablet on which is written a declaration in the name of Cyrus referring to restoration of temples and repatriation of exiled peoples, has often been taken as corroboration of authenticity of the biblical decrees attributed to Cyrus. 16. But other scholars point out that the cylinder stick is specific to Babylon and Mesopotamia and makes no mention of Judah or Jerusalem. 16. Professor Lester L. Grab asserted that the alleged decree of Cyrus regarding Judah cannot be considered authentic, but that there was a general policy of allowing deportees to return and to re-establish cult sites. He also stated that archaeology suggests that the return was a trickle taking place over decades, rather than a single event. 17. The Persians may have experimented initially with ruling Judah as a Davidic client kingdom under descendants of Jehoiachin. 18. But by the mid-5th century BCE, Judah had become in practice a theocracy ruled by hereditary high priests. 19. And a Persian-appointed governor, frequently Jewish, charged with keeping order and seeing that tribute was paid. 20. A second group of 5,000, led by Ezra and Nehemiah, returned to Judah in 456 BC. The first was empowered by the Persian king to enforce the Torah. The second had the status of governor and a royal mission to restore the walls of the city. 21. The Bible mentions tension between the returnees and those who had remained in Judah, the former rebuffing the attempt of the peoples of the land to participate in their building of the temple. This attitude was based partly on the exclusivism which the exiles had developed while in Babylon and, probably, partly on disputes over property. 22. The careers of Ezra and Nehemiah in 5th century BCE were thus a kind of religious colonization in reverse, an attempt by one of the many Jewish factions in Babylon to create a self-segregated, ritually pure society inspired by the prophecies of Ezekiel and his followers. 23. Silver coin, Bira, minted in the Persian province of Ya'ad, dated c. 375 to 332 BC. Of bearded head-wearing crown, possibly representing Persian Great King. Rev. Falcon facing, head right, with wings spread. Paleo-Hebrew YHD to right. The Persian era, and especially the period between 538 and 400 BC, laid the foundations for the unified Judaic religion and the beginning of a scriptural canon. 24. The final Torah is widely seen as a product of the Persian period, probably 453-50 BCE. 25. This consensus echoes a traditional Jewish view which gives Ezra a pivotal role in its promulgation. 26. It has been suggested that Darius' reform of the empire's administrative structures, which included the collection, codification, and administration of local law codes, was the driving force behind the Jewish Torah's redaction. 27. Ya'ad's population significantly decreased during the Persian era. It is likely that it never exceeded 30,000. This represents a 70% decrease when compared to the late First Temple period. 28. Jerusalem's area was also smaller compared with the late First Temple period. The city shrank to its pre-8th century BCE size, and its inhabited areas, the city of David and the Temple Mount, had a population of around 1,500. Together with the surrounding farms and unwalled settled areas, Jerusalem's population was around 3,000 people. The rest of the population lived in small, unwalled towns and villages. 28-29. The Israel of the Persian period consisted of descendants of the inhabitants of the former kingdom of Judah, returnees from the Babylonian exile community, Mesopotamians who had joined